Good evening and welcome to another episode of For the Record. The recent attack on a 9-year-old girl in Nasinu has shocked and outraged the nation. Many are calling for heads to roll and calling on the authorities to do something. But what a lot of us don't realize is the trauma and the torment that the victims go through and probably have to live with for the rest of their lives. For discussions on this, we have with us in studio tonight Dr. Muriel Allen, a child psychiatrist and assistant professor at the Fiji School of Medicine, as well as Alita Wangambada, the counseling services team leader at Empower Pacific, an NGO that works with victims of sexual assault and rape. Ladies, thank you very much for being in the studio with us tonight. As I mentioned, the recent attack on the 9-year-old girl has brought to the fore something that people say has been a problem within Fiji society for a long time. Alita, I'd like to begin with you by asking your organization, the support services that you provide, how many of these cases would you say comes through Empower Pacific on a yearly basis?
Thank you, Edwin. Empower Pacific has been in operation since 1994, and we started off in Lautoka, and then from then in 2008 we moved across to Suva and then to Lambasa as well. And over the years we've seen, because of our partnership with the Ministry of Health and Medical Services and also the Department of Social Welfare, we have continued to receive cases from both the departments in terms of those that have gone through sexual assault. So I would say that it ranges from time to time, but yes, we are picking up the number of referrals that come through from the Department of Social Welfare.
In terms of the services that you provide, what would you say to people sitting at home and they're watching? What does Empower Pacific actually do?
We are a counseling organization, so we provide counseling support to those that are referred to us. So counseling support meaning basically we listen to the survivors that come through. So listening to them and believing in them. Most of them, they've come, when they are referred, some of them, their own family do not believe that they're telling the truth. So as counselors, we're there, we believe them, we are there, we let them know that we are here to hear their story and validate, the enormous emotional turmoil that they're going through at that time, not just emotional, but psychological as well. So, so it would take from one session to many more sessions of working with the survivor, with the various, the impact that they're going through. So for some of the impact, it could be maybe because the child is start to relive the incident again. They're showing it by, reenacting play with other children as well. So that's when it's been highlighted and it's been referred to us. Other cases where maybe just numbness and avoidance, or sometimes, parents do come and then they say that, they're having nightmares, but not really realizing the cause of why the nightmares were happening. So those are some of the things we start to work with the children and also with the parents. It's very important to have the support of the family so that we can bring about normalcy for this child again. So that normally takes, not just one session, but many, many sessions.
Dr. Muriel, Alita has basically set the framework of what a child goes through if they have been victims of rape and sexual assault. What actually goes on in their minds on a psychological level that leads to these sort of acts? I mean, is it trauma? Or what is it exactly?
I think it's important for us to first state, like when a person is victimized that way, it's a very traumatic experience and they're helpless, they're rendered helpless. So typically victims of assault or rape, they go through mostly a course that we call post-traumatic stress disorder. And I'd like to explain, probably, understanding that paradigm, you'll be able to explain the behaviors, what happens. But there are factors that are important to consider. One is the age of the child, the developmental, the developmental level, what type of abuse has happened, you see the degree, was it one time, was it ongoing, the abuser or the perpetrator, is he related or unknown to the child, was there physical threat, all these sorts of factors play, you know. But then typically after that, then they develop symptoms of what we call post-traumatic stress disorder, which can last for a few months to over years. And it, you know, the life of the person will never be the same again. The cardinal symptoms would be like one is persistent experiencing of the event. That is why they will have nightmares. Because like, again, the memory of that event becomes abnormally absorbed. You know, like, and because it was so traumatic, the mind cannot deal with it. And to preserve your own sanity or the person's sanity, the mind's defenses are up to swallow that whole memory without, attention to detail. So that will also explain a lot of, like, that's why they will have experiencing, they will have nightmares. There will be also avoidance, you know, like if you have been traumatized in this place, they will try to avoid places similar to or even that place where this happened. Another would be persistent hyperarousal or hypervigilance. Like right now, when we heard about this case of this 9-year-old girl, the whole society is traumatized. That's why there's vigilance, and everybody, you know, like the parents and all school teachers would like to protect their children. So again, how a person recovers or the acute or chronic effects will depend again on whether there's a supportive environment. Like Alita had mentioned, and it's not uncommon, when a child discloses that somebody did this to me, they are, you know, the parents say they don't believe, and they say, you're lying, your uncle can't do that, maybe it's your fault, maybe it's you who did it. So again, there will be, apart from the psychological effects, these can be manifest in physical effects. You know, they could, some kids will regress, they go back to bedwetting, they'll be afraid to, they will have palpitations, they will feel afraid to be left alone. So they will also have low self-esteem. It really changes the whole person's life. And I'd like to point to, it's not only the child or the person, it changes the whole family's life. You know, like if I may proceed, you know, like if the perpetrator is known to the child, it's a little, it becomes more complicated. Because like, it shatters the whole family. Like when you say you are, for example, an uncle or a dad who is supposedly the protector, in a position of trust, that trust is completely shattered. You know, it's like, where else can I be safe? You know.
Unfortunately, it's time to take a break. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back and more discussions on tonight's issue. Welcome back to the show. Tonight we're talking about the trauma and stress suffered by victims of rape and sexual assault. Our guests, once again, are Dr. Muriel Allen, a child psychiatrist and assistant professor at the Fiji School of Medicine, and Alita Wangambada is the team leader for counseling services at Empower Pacific. We were talking about how a child is impacted in the long term. What about the impact it has on society or the bonds of society? We're not talking about specific incidents or case-by-case basis, but as a society, as a country, how does this reflect on us, the fact that we have children who are being sexually assaulted and raped, and more often than not by somebody who's in a position of trust? That's a question for both of you.
No, like, see, it's quite difficult to say that it happens in our society. It happens everywhere, many, many places in the world. It's not just Fiji. I think for our country, it's like now the awareness is increasingly growing. So, but again, what happens is because we get more and more reports, it can really have two effects on my mind. You can be hypervigilant as a society, or you can be numbed, sort of desensitized to it. Oh, it's okay, it's always happening.
It's just another rape.
It's another rape, you know, it's been going on for some time. You know, so, but again, because it's an abnormal event, you know, it's not the norm. It's not the norm. So I don't think it really reflects upon, you know, like how that our society is getting bad or something like that. But I look at it as us being more aware that this happens. It's becoming now, like the people are now be saying, this can happen. Because like, see, our country is like very friendly, typically very friendly, very close, religious. So no, we think maybe it will not happen, but it is happening.
Alita?
I guess a way to look at it as well is our society is such that it's, you know, the closed, I guess, you know, we are closely knitted society, so therefore if something happens, it affects a lot of us in so many ways, so we take it upon ourselves that, you know, that's our problem. But the hope is that we can also approach any problem like that, whereby we don't turn a blind eye to, you know, when we hear someone calling for help, you know, so we be proactive and then do something about it together. You know, I support what Doctor said in terms of it is a phenomenon that happens all over the world. It's not something that's just, you know, Fiji. So it's coming to our shores now that it's been highlighted, so therefore now we are on the dot. It's now becoming known that we are having the same issues. But it's very important then as a society that's, you know, that have all these ties within, that we can use that. We have a culture that, you know, that a communal culture. So we can use that in a way to look out for each other. So if someone's walking down the road and they're needing help, all the more reason for everyone else to, you know, to do their part and support the person that needs help. So it's not just the parent, but as a community, we are looking out for each other in that way.
Given the problems that a victim goes through, the ones that you pointed out in terms of trauma and nightmares and such, how does a victim go on with life? How do they carry on as adolescents and then as adults? If you could give us some reflections from some of the cases that have come through Empower Pacific.
If it's not addressed earlier, then of course we will see that somehow that will be with them until, you know, even later on in life, and some of them, you know, would really, I guess, go to their grave with it. So some of the cases that we have seen, basically, it's now coming to light. They are now perpetrators, but it so happened that they were victims as, you know, as a young child. So that's why it's important now for us to know and really be there and support, you know, anyone that is affected at this point in time, not just the person, because we know that over the years, if we don't bring that normalcy, somehow, you know, they may not go back to school, or they continue to be ostracized by, you know, the community. And again, the community can play a very big role if they start to ostracize, you know, the person, and that will affect them for the rest of their life. So it's very important now to, you know, when we know that there's someone who's been affected, that the family comes first. If they don't have a family, who are the significant others who can be there to offer the support? We now have many organizations that are there, many individuals who would like to support. So that's where we can hold hands and really, you know, do this together. Because not one person can do it, not one organization can say that they can do it.
I'd like to come back to the point about where you said the victims become perpetrators. We'll pick up on that shortly. But Doc, from your point of view, in terms of the development of an individual, do they have the right values that they would have had if they had not been victimized? And are they able to bond with society in a manner that any other child would?
You see, like the values is different. The values, you know, it's about what you are taught, you know, from your family. But the effects of these types of trauma, as I said, shatters the person's self-confidence, the person's trust in the security of the world outside, or even the home, and the person and the child will be, you know, usually they're isolated because I'm different, I'm damaged, I'm not like others. So it's very hard for them to form trusting relationships. It usually heightens during adolescence, when normally you find yourself. You know, that's our task when we reach adolescence. We sort of find what we want in life, who do we want to become, and that becomes an issue when the conflicts that have happened earlier in childhood will resurface and say, because it will, the sense of insecurity will resurface again. So it makes the person really totally different.
How? I mean, could you give us an example of how a victim might develop into an adolescent and an adult? Some of the negatives that they might carry with them. We hear stories of victims who've fallen out of society, and they've sort of struggled through life, not just as an individual, but they've fallen into the wrong crowd even.
Yeah, that's right. Like again, see, like from school age, about 6 to 11, we normally develop our character. That means the typical ways of us responding to certain events in our life. But because you have been traumatized, your life has changed, you become distrusting. You become skeptical of people's motives. So you withdraw. Instead of building friendships, now you develop, it becomes ingrained in the child or that person, those certain ways of coping or addressing events in their life. So again, when they become adolescents, when you say, how come they go to the wrong crowd? It can be a carryover of that problem if it happened in childhood, or even if it happened in adolescence. Why? Because a sense of damaged self. Will they go to, to reinforce that they're okay, or they want to have control over who comes to them, or who they have relationships with, is to sort of a way of empowering themselves, that I am still lovable, having one boyfriend or one girlfriend. But by the way, sorry, Edwin, it's not only girls. Mm-hmm. We also attend to young boys who have been victimized. No? So the relationship is more of one to, it's a purpose for themselves, that I am still lovable, that I have control. So they fall into more, many relationships, and they tend to gravitate towards the same persons with the same characteristics. Yeah, the numbness or this self-insecurity or sense of shattered sense of self, they can go into drugs, they can go to numb that feeling, go into alcohol, forget about it, and then they end up having more trouble.
All right, and on that note, it's time to take another break. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Pula Vinaka, and welcome back to the show once again. Alita, you pointed out, I think twice tonight, you've mentioned that the victims become perpetrators. Is it a cycle? How does it happen?
Not all victims will become perpetrators. I'm saying, like, for certain individuals that may not, that have gone to an extent where they were really traumatized and somehow not supported, and then the environment again, if the environment somehow, did not allow them to grow and know the difference, and that could be one of the factors that could lead someone to become a perpetrator. So, like what Doc said earlier, there's so many factors to consider. So therefore, it's important. I guess I will go back to the fact that it's important when someone goes through that incident, all the support that can be given is, should be given, so that we can minimize that the trauma that would go on to adult life, and maybe that's not being addressed.
We do hear a lot of reports that victims are coming forward. They are telling their guardians or their parents or whoever it may be that this has been happening with them, and the matter is taken to police, and it's then taken to the judiciary. Perpetrators are held accountable. We are seeing more of this, but do you feel that because of our culture and the culture of silence or taboo, there are many that go unreported? Is that still a problem for us?
I think over the years that has been, that could have been a big factor over the years, that's why people are not coming forward. The fear of being ostracized, the fear of, breaking up the family unit, the communal unit. So that's, that is a big factor in terms of people coming forward. And even now, more awareness are happening in the community. You know, like for example, the program that Department of Social Welfare is doing in the zero tolerance, you know, for violence in the certain villages. So that's highlighting that, you know, if we can address gender-based issues well and create a lot of awareness, it will address some of these things on the side. So yes, it's coming out. It's giving the community that yes, there's support, there's help, but the confidence again, you know, slowly it depends on individual. When there's so many things that they'll have to think about. If I go forward, what will that mean for my family? What will that mean? Do I have the support, you know, that surrounds me that will enable me to go forward and report? And if, you know, the community lashes out at me, I have the network to support me. So that would be something that, you know, for someone to come forward. If they have that, I think that's helping people. So I think the more work we continue to do in the community, the better, so that they know that, yes, there's support, you know, the more awareness, you know, on media as well, that there's support for those who are victims or survivors, the better, so that everyone who's maybe suffering and are going through it, whether be in their own homes, you know, they can be suffering in silence, at least for them to know, I guess, if they keep hearing it over and over again, that there is help. One day they will pick up the phone. And I guess, you know, another medium that we have right now, the 1325, the Child Helpline, that's another great opportunity, not just for children, but for parents and for anyone in the community who can call and seek help.
Do you believe that there are still witnesses or people who know this is happening but they turn a blind eye?
Yes.
That's still happening?
Sadly.
And Doc, that leads me to my next question. Fiji has traditionally been a patriarchal society. This cuts across all race and all religions. Do you think that's a factor that adds to this, to the problem of rape and sexual assault against children?
Again, you know, it's very hard to answer that question, Edwin, to be honest. Because, like, again, it's not the setup of our families or our society. It's, you know, like, again, if you understand, many studies have been conducted on why this happened. You know, because, like, one issue would be the child is allowed is a sexual being. These people, for example, won't get their they don't get stimulated by adults. Their object of affection remains to be a child. Those, for example, families, those fathers or uncles who abuse someone within their family, they found out that they have not bonded with the child when the child was growing up. So there is they haven't developed that father-child or mother-son or mother-child relationship. They have not attached. So this, why incest can happen, because the child, even if it is theirs, is like not bonded to me, you know. Now, the issue of, you say, why this happens in secrecy, I agree with Alida. There's so many things, you know. Society can be cruel. You know, like when we hear of this news, people are so curious, who's that girl? You know, it's probably because this is something traumatic, this is something that we cannot accept. So you want to deal with it. People want to know what's happening. You know, but again, it's not how we are patriarchal. No, it's not an issue, because it can happen even if it's in matriarchal societies. Yeah? But the child is sexualized. But in even if it's incest or rape, it is an issue again of power. The person is held helpless. You know, so they always look for someone who's vulnerable, and that's why children are more common victims.
All right, Doc, it's time for another break. We'll be right back. More discussions to follow. Welcome back to the show. Our topic tonight is the trauma and the distress that victims of rape and sexual assault live through. Our guests are Dr. Muriel Allen, a child psychiatrist and assistant professor at the Fiji School of Medicine. And our other guest is the team leader for counseling services at Empower Pacific, Alita Wangambada. We were talking about, you, Doc, we're talking about power. What exactly did you mean that the victims are made to feel helpless? It's a power trip?
It's because, like a lot of perpetrators, a majority of them would have very low self-esteem. Like, so that's why, like in many of those who are caught, you'll see, like some people say, what? People they know, who know them, can't believe that they're able to do this. Because they're usually typically quiet, not assertive. And now, to assert power, to assert themselves, they go for a vulnerable victim. More often is the child, or someone who is walking alone in a dark alley, something like that. So it is sex really is an issue, or rape is an issue of power. It's not about sex.
Alita, when you have cases come through the door, these victims, whatever age they may be, adults, adolescents, or children, what is their behavior like? In a sense, are they still able to act their age if they're a child, or are they able to trust? Is it easy for them to open up and talk about what they've been through?
It depends really on the extent of what abuse that they've gone through. So, for example, like for some of them, if they have been living with it for a while, so they've gotten used to the process, and somehow because someone has picked it up from the family that something's not right, then they would bring them. So symptoms or things that we would notice is, they'll be very quiet, they wouldn't have an eye contact with you, hardly have anything to say. So that's why, like when we work with children, a lot of times we have to use like toys or things like that, play therapy, where they are able to express themselves without having to say the words, because it's painful sometimes. So, but sometimes when they do those play, and then it comes out slowly, the story of what they're going on. So it depends really on the extent of what they have gone through. So for some of them, if it's low self-esteem because of what's been taken away from them, and for someone who's an adolescent or maybe an adult, it's their dignity that's been somehow taken away. So it's really trying to work on rebuilding that. So over time, we would see that slowly that that the light will come back on. They're looking forward. At first, maybe it's such a drag to come to counseling. Why do I have to go and speak to this person? So over time, then they see the value in it, and they begin to like what they see, the changes. So that's why many a times we work with family members to, maybe some homeworks will be given to them, little tasks that they can do to try and regain or bring back normalcy in their life, normal routine, especially for young children. Routine is something that helps them. So if they can bring that back, it really helps a lot. So over time, that what we will start to see, that the smile is back, the drawing is changing now, and they're talking a lot more, and so that would then indicate that maybe it's time to terminate counseling. So those are some of the things that we would notice.
The fact that the perpetrator has been taken to task and they've been imprisoned, does that, in a child's mind who does not understand the concept of law and justice necessarily because they're too young, does that give them a feeling of safety at the end of the day? Or does that sort of close the circle for them?
It does. It actually holds that person accountable and punished for what they did. And that sort of tells the child, there's the world I can still trust. I am not the bad person. But then it's not only the perpetrator being put behind bars, it's also the continuing support and love that, as they grow up, which is important.
Alita, from your experience, do you have incidences where the victims have been informed that the person who did it has been sent to prison and they are serving time for their crime. I mean, how do victims react to that?
Depending again on the age group, maybe for someone like who's an adult, maybe to them, that's a relief. But then sometimes there's guilt as well, especially if the perpetrator is a family member.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course during the process, the relief is there that, he's gone inside, but then there's the family that she has to deal with, the community, she has to go back to the community. And of course, someone will come and say to them, it's your fault, why did you do that? Now, everyone knows about our problem.
Mm-hmm.
So that is what they have to continue to deal with day in and day out. And that's why, they would continue to need to come and talk about how do I deal with that? When, I'm happy that that's, justice is served, but then the very people around me are not very supportive. What do I do with that? So for younger children, maybe, yes, they may not understand that extent, so we haven't had an opportunity to see that. But more so for the adult, there has been cases where, it's good, and then on the other hand, it's not so good because of what the immediate family members or the community itself will try to do, or, the words that comes back, that is something that they have to.
So here you have somebody who's already going through a traumatic experience,
Mm-hmm.
and then you've got people, society or community who's making it worse for that individual. I mean, how does that affect a victim?
The person becomes, again, insecure. Most of them will go into really clinical depression. Some of them hurt themselves. They come to us with severe depression. They have to be in hospital. We have to put them on medications. As I said, Edwin, it really changes the person's life.
All right. And once again, Doc, we'll take another break. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. We're just about to wrap up tonight, but before we go, we have still some time left with our two guests. Let's look at what we as a society can do and what we as individuals and a community can do for people who have suffered rape and sexual assault. Let's talk about on-the-ground realities. If I know somebody who's been a victim and they haven't received any support services, what can I do? Who do I go to?
The first thing is, if someone comes and tells you that this is what is going on, to believe them, and and don't take it lightly, take it seriously, and and then listen to them. And if they are ready, and some of them may not be so ready to really, they just want to talk to someone and get it off. But it's important then to make referrals to the right people who can offer them support. We do have at Empower Pacific, we have a line that operates on weekdays, 5626. They can call, and that can go to any of our, because we have our offices in the north, in Lambasa, here in Suva at CWM and Nosori, and also in the west in Lotoka and Nendi. So, any of the counselors can attend to them in any of our offices. Again, there is the child helpline, 1325, where they can call, and the counselors there, they also work with us in terms of a referral system. Where they are not available, they refer to any of our offices that could attend to that. But it's really important to do something about it and not just joke around it. And I guess in our community as well, because we have this, sometimes when someone is telling you something, you tend to just it's a joke, or but I think it's time for us to really listen, and listen well to someone who's saying or seeking help in that manner.
Especially if it's a child saying this. The parent should have sort of alarm bells ringing when a child talks about somebody touched me there, or they talk something about sex, which is unusual for their age. Those are red flags. And then may I go, Edwin, not just those who have been victimized already. If I don't know whether I should say this much later, but that as a society, I think we should, as parents, teach our children to protect their body. You know, like as soon as they could understand naming the parts of their body, we should be able to name the genitals and teach them that that's a no-touch zone. No? So, and then as soon as they can look after themselves, they go to the toilet or something, wash themselves, teach them to do it on their own, so nobody touches it. So, and if anyone touches it, then they say, you're not supposed to touch me, you know. The other thing is, like, for when someone goes through like this and understands that, they should understand that they are not alone. Now, you are not alone. There is the law behind us. There's the police, and there's many organizations who help these people. So I think that's the first thing to do. You're not alone.
When we talk about support services, we've got Empower Pacific, but really, do we have enough support services for all the victims? Are we in a position to be able to provide the help that victims need?
We do have, you know, like Fiji Women's Crisis Center, and there's many other organizations, but, you know, to tell you the fact, it's not enough. It's really not enough. There needs to be more that's done. You know, we need to set up a lot more, because, you know, every day there's something new that's coming up. So that's why, you know, whilst we're waiting for, you know, organization to set up, the important thing is for the community to, you know, to be responsible, the community to start looking out for each other, for the family to start, you know, like working out on spending time with their children, and, you know, and have quality family time. And that's something as well that through counseling we are realizing that children are saying that they don't have quality time with their family, with parents. So that those are some of the things that we as a community, whilst we're waiting for other support to come in, what can we do so parents can take a lead role really in spending more quality time with their family and making sure that they're there, they're listening to them. Because a lot of times when things are happening in their life, parents are not there to listen to them, and therefore, you know, they can become vulnerable in that way.
Doc, in terms of expert help in psychiatry and psychology, are there enough trial psychiatrists? Do we have enough services for children? Well, not just children, maybe for adults and adolescents as well.
I think, you know, Edwin, it's never enough services. While we have a little bit more trained doctors with special interest in mental health, we have more, but I don't think it's ever enough. You know, like Alita's saying, you know, the recovery period takes a long time. And it's not like that you see one person once and that's it, so you can get a new load. But then the therapy or the counseling will take months, sometimes years. So, you know, like you can imagine getting more and more people to yours, coming to your service. It's a bit heavy.
Well, on that note, we have to wrap up tonight's show. Thank you, Dr. Muriel and Alita, for being here tonight. We've had some very fruitful discussions. And for you, I hope that you've been able to take away some valuable lessons from what we've been talking about tonight. That's it for the show from me. But before we go, up next is My Say with Nemani Ndelembatiki. Remember, if you have comments or questions, you can email fortherecord@fbc.com.fj. Good night.
Good evening. I'm Nemani Ndelembatiki of the Fiji Sun. Welcome to Fiji's only TV editorial show. In the second installment of My Say, I had warned members of the tripartite partners in the Employment Relations Advisory Board about the importance of continuing dialogue on the proposed labor reforms. Now, the horse has bolted, so to speak. Those proposed reforms are now part of the Employment Relations Promulgation Amendment Act 2015, passed by Parliament last week. Every opportunity was there to discuss the ERP Amendment Bill before it went to Parliament, to the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Justice, Law and Human Rights, and back to Parliament. But the Fiji Trade Union Congress did not grab it. Even the tripartite joint report to the International Labour Organization's governing body in Geneva should have provided an excellent platform to promote more dialogue. But in the 11th hour, the Fiji Trade Union Congress pulled out and decided to go it alone. It virtually shut the door to continuing discussions. While it claims that it has legitimate reasons for doing what it did, it gave little room for the government and the employers to move. It claims that after Geneva, it had written to the government asking for dates to resume talks, but got no response. In government, no one seems to know about it. We have now come to this critical juncture in our quest for peaceful industrial relations climate. We are stuck with an impasse. The government and the employers on one side riding on the spirit and hope of the new Employment Relations Promulgation Amendment Act. On the opposite side is the Fiji Trade Union Congress fuming because the new law does not contain what they wanted. Where to from here? The FTUC has said there is no point to talk now because Parliament has passed the new law. Given its track record, the FTUC will continue its battle all the way to Geneva and use all its international connections to protest some aspects of the reforms. Basically, it vehemently opposes the extension of the list of essential industries and provisions for arbitration to resolve disputes, and the choice for workers to join a trade union or a bargaining unit. All these provisions are there for a purpose. They create an environment that facilitates the resolution of disputes and gives workers greater flexibility in the collective bargaining process. Naturally, this may be seen as a threat to trade union solidarity, but workers must be allowed the opportunity to seek better pay and conditions instead of being bogged down by union bureaucracy and militancy. Industrial relations have evolved over the years. Fiji needs to learn from other countries that have undergone this metamorphosis. There is now a greater awareness and acceptance that the type of industrial relations that existed in the 1980s, especially, is no longer compatible with the way we do business today. Workplace conditions have improved significantly, and more employers realize that in order to increase productivity, they need to invest in creating a worker-friendly environment. Legislation has been introduced to protect workers from exploitation and discrimination. The issue of national wage rates must be seen in its proper perspectives. It's unrealistic to compare us with countries that have larger economies. Everything is relative. As far as the future is concerned, it's now in the hands of the trade unions and the ILO. They can bring the economy down on its knees if they want to. And that could be a reality if the Commission of Inquiry comes to Fiji. God forbid that it happens. I'm Nemani Ndelembetiki, and that was my say. For more of my views, you can read the Fiji Sun. See you next week.